3, 2, 1. All right, and we are live. Exercises Medicine, episode number 10. So now we are officially in double digits. Folks, this afternoon, this episode of the podcast is going to be a follow-up from the conversation that Nick and I had about a month ago or so. As we recall, we were talking about Nick's health and fitness program, things he was satisfied with. I shared some experiences for myself. And so now we have sort of a follow-up, which I think it will be very inspiring to a lot of you listening to this. I know it's been inspiring to me to see Nick and how he's been progressing with some of his health and fitness goals. So without further ado, we bring to you Nick and Mike.
Yeah. So thanks for, again, allowing me to share this. Really appreciate it. I felt that some of these insights kind of, they were a hard pill to swallow, in the beginning, right? But I feel like my life has been so positively impacted by it. So within the first 6 weeks after that podcast, I lost about 25 pounds.
Wow.
And then now, I think it's been about 12 weeks, maybe like 10-ish, give or take. But, I'm down like 30, 35-ish.
Incredible.
So, yeah. So the first thing that was really difficult was changing my diet, I think. I feel diet was probably the greatest impact of all this, was learning how to, I basically cut nearly my food intake by, I would say, easily like 50%. So I stopped, like, my breakfast was half. I would eat like 5 or 6 meals, and I cut down to like 3, and then maybe like a few snacks. I learned that a big thing is there is a difference between being hungry and just not being full, right? And I think psychologically, when I was gaining weight, I kind of forgot that. And when I had these exercise goals of being like a big power lifter and all that, I forgot that, it's okay to not be full, right? And then, if you're starving, go ahead and eat or something, right? But understanding that, and it's even okay to be hungry for a little bit, right? You don't need to, constantly cater to whatever your body's telling you immediately, right? So for me, that was like really important. I remember in the beginning when I first started losing weight, and I would just get these like massive headaches when I was hungry. And then now I can be hungry for a little bit and I'm perfectly fine. Yeah, I think that was, I don't know what like the physiology is behind that specifically, but I'm able to do way more stuff, and I don't have to think about, when am I going to eat, or if I'm going to be hungry or whatever, you know what I mean? I started incorporating a lot of fitness into my daily routine. So I started biking to work a lot. I substitute my workouts in for that commute. Which opened my day up vastly. I wasn't have to worrying about this, and this, and blah, 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 blah. So I changed my exercise program too, to something that incorporated a lot of calisthenics, a lot more dynamic things that you would just be better prepared in your daily life. So personally, I'm pretty familiar because I was in the military with I put in a lot of like military style workouts, just because I felt like that was something I can kind of fall back on, and I know like what I was like during that time. So I was like, okay, yeah, let me just do that. But I'm sure like anyone could do something similar that doesn't necessarily have to revolve around that theme. But yeah, so since then, I've lost like 30 pounds, like I said. As of December, that was like my heaviest. I was like 245.
Okay.
So now I'm 200 pounds. That's been like about
45 pounds.
Yeah.
So we're talking about you said December, that was 245, and now we're almost at the end of June. So in about 6 months, you've cut 45 pounds.
Yeah, I'd say the majority of that weight was in the first 6 weeks of that podcast, though. So like the 30 pounds, I was 230 on that DEXA scan that we took. and I lost. I think I was like 230, and then I lost the 30 pounds in the first 6 weeks. I don't advise anyone to lose that much weight that quickly. I'd say.
Sure.
I think a lot of that also could have been like just water weight, being bloated, and all this. And I'm familiar with like my limits because this isn't my first rodeo with losing weight.
Mm-hmm.
So I was very comfortable with making those changes. What are the exact limits for weight loss typically, like ACSM?
Well, most of the clinical trials would suggest that if the goal is keeping the weight off,
Mm-hmm.
if the goal is keeping the weight off long term, slow and steady will win the race.
Mm-hmm.
So, because there are 3,500 calories in 1 pound of fat, if you restrict your diet by 500 calories, you'll lose 1 pound per week, which would, in your particular case, would be looking at a 45-week timeline to get to where you are now. Now, the upper limit would be no more than 2 pounds per week if the goal is slow, sustained weight loss, sort of like a realization that you had lost the weight. So that would be either we have to induce a caloric deficit upwards of 1,000 calories per day, but that 1,000 calories can be realized either through 500 cut in a diet, 1,000 cut in a diet, or a 500 cut in a diet and 500 cut increase with exercise. You can also increase, like I remember when I lost weight the first time in high school, I was 240 pounds at 13 years old.
Wow.
So I was pretty large,
Beast.
and I was playing offensive lineman for my varsity football team as a freshman.
Mm-hmm.
And so the point is there was a lot of other linemen on the team, and they're like, well, you did great your freshman year, but like we really can use you in the backfield, playing fullback and playing stand-up linebacker and things like that, and defensive end. And so I didn't need to be that heavy anymore. And so they basically were telling me that I was going to be replaced on the offensive line if I didn't lose weight, right?
Yeah.
So I lost from that off season, which was from roughly early December until spring football, which was usually sometime in May in high school.
Yeah.
I had lost 50 pounds, right?
Wow.
50
Yeah,
pounds,
that's
right?
tough, man.
Now I went to 195 from 245. And that's where I was. So 195, and then all of a sudden I'm fast. I'm playing defensive end, stand up, linebacker. But
I bet you felt great too.
no, I totally did. I mean, I was for they call it Hell Week, and basically what Hell Week involves is you run stadiums in the heat, and then you run hills, and then you do all kinds of cone drills, and you do practices, and it's very, very hard on your body. And I knew that that I wanted to continue to play varsity football.
Yeah.
So I took my off-season lifting regime very, very seriously, and very similar to yourself. It was cutting weight by increasing. I did it on the end of caloric expenditure mostly. So I wouldn't restrict myself in terms of what I was eating, but the rule was, because I grew up Catholic, I started my diet around when Ash Wednesday would come, so the 6 weeks prior to Easter. And so usually for Easter, you have to give up something.
Yeah.
And so what I gave up was no eating in between meals and no sodas anymore. So I cut out Coca-Cola, and it was just water, and I could eat whatever I want, but it has to be completed in those 3 meals: breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And outside of that, there's no additional eating.
Okay.
From a rule.
It's kind of what I did too, I think.
Yeah. So ultimately what ended up happening in this case was I was getting up, eating, going to school. After school, I would do off-season lifting for football.
Yeah.
And then I would go home, eat dinner, and then I would go and I played in a basketball league. I was a good basketball player too.
Okay.
It was a Friday night league, and I would play basketball after dinner, right? It's 8 o'clock games, 9 o'clock games, 7 o'clock games.
Wow.
Right.
Yeah.
And so sometimes you're playing in these 60-minute games and you have more caloric expenditure. So I looked at it as a mathematical equation where I knew where I needed to be by the time spring football came, and I didn't want to lose strength. And so I actually increased my squat from, I believe at the time it was only about 275 pounds. But then once I started doing resistance training in the off season, by the time I went out for my junior season, so a year and a half later,
Yeah.
that was when I squatted 565 pounds.
That-
So I had huge
Wow.
jumps.
That's interesting too, because I felt like I was actually going to ask you, how do you feel about catering your specific exercise, I guess, kind of type, whether it's more endurance based? I feel that getting these more endurance based exercise and like workouts helped me lose weight. But then I was like, oh, what's your opinion on that's interesting. You were continuing to power lift and you got stronger, but you also lost weight.
Yeah, I cut a lot of calories from my diet, right? For breakfast, I was mostly
Yeah.
eating Special K cereal with a banana, and that was it. And I was measuring my food, too. That was the other thing. So I took a very prescriptive approach to this where I wasn't just like putting cereal in a bowl. I was saying, okay, well, the serving size is this. So I knew to a T, if I took a scoop of cereal and put it into a bowl, if I measure the milk and put it into a bowl, I knew exactly how many calories.
So you were counting calories.
I was counting calories. And then I wasn't counting calories for lunch as much, but I knew like the fruits that I was eating, like
Ballpark.
a banana roughly, right? So I kind of like knew mathematically how many calories that I needed to burn. And like if I had a cheat day where I didn't eat particularly well,
Yeah.
and I know that I had a lot more calories in my system, I would make up for that in the summer before Hell Week in August for the fall season by going to the track and running laps. Now, some people look at that as, not the best thing to do for yourself because you could very easily become, an issue, psychologically speaking. Where
Yeah.
You become obsessed with it.
So I'm glad that you brought that up, because
Body dysmorphia.
that's what happened. I think that's what happened to me. I don't know if I mentioned it last episode, but I kind of got carried away for a brief period of time with counting calories, and I would personally, when it comes to things like the MyFitnessPal and everything, I felt like the type of person I am. I can be kind of anal at times. You know what I mean? Very like very regimented with things.
Sure.
I always joke that it's not OCD I have, it's CDO, because that way it's in alphabetical order. But I felt very like probably for a good 6-month period, I was controlling my life so much. I wasn't like going out, hanging out with friends. I wasn't doing this. I became obsessed with like losing all of this weight and getting these calories in and not affording. You know what I mean? And whatever.
Sure.
And then it's like, what's the point of like having this super low body fat if you're not even enjoying your life and you're not, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like all that kind of stuff. So learning to accept that was important for me. And then I kind of, I got really lax with that by gaining all this weight. I like really admired. I was like, yeah, I want to look like Eddie Hall and blah, 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 blah. Like these huge power lifters that are like, 30% body, 40% body fat, but they can lift like 1,000 pounds.
Sure.
Granted, I'm not 6'7", but and but then I started to like, my knees were killing me. You know what I mean? I would like get down on the ground if I had to do some kind of like work where I was, laying supine and like looking up and like had to screw drive something or whatever. And it just like, it was tough to like move my body. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And then, then you have to realize, I think, swallowing that kind of pill where you realize, yeah, like I'm not going to be an insanely strong power lifter, or, you know what I mean? Like it's not. And also like, what is the cost of those type of goals? Right.
Sure.
And I think for the most of us that are no longer those varsity athletes and, you know what I mean? Or, actually like operational military or blah, 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 or this and this, I think I think it's great to have a performance-based goal in order to continue to motivate you and not keep your eyes on that scale, because I think losing a pound a week might not seem a lot when you're constantly stepping on the scale, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but not to get carried away with that performance-based goal to where, like we talked about, like in one of our first episodes where we have that kind of the reasons why you exercise, right? And more like you can kind of sacrifice the other components of the benefits of exercise by going into, what I mean, just strength or just performance. You can sacrifice your health and your looks, or by going to looks, you can sacrifice your strength and your conditioning and your health and blah blah blah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that was like really hard to, I think, accept. You know what I mean? But yeah, that was crazy that you lost all that weight and you were getting stronger.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was.
I mean, I'll put it to this way. So one of the persons, so I do a lot of reading, both, I read information about obviously latest articles in exercise science and sports medicine research, strength and conditioning, health.
Yeah.
But I also read a lot of books and, anything from personal finance. And I'll put it to this way. I want to get into the mindset of it. So you can get into particular periods of time where things are, relatively comforting, and we enjoy things.
Yeah.
But when I was in that time period, I knew that I really wanted to play varsity football. I mean, like that was like,
Yeah.
I knew from the time I was in middle school that I wanted to be, because where I come from, I went to Naugatuck High School, and there's a long-standing tradition between Naugatuck and Ansonia, and it's over 100 years they've been playing each other on Thanksgiving.
Oh, like a rivalry?
Big time rivalry. So I knew that I wanted to be viewed as a high school student. I wanted to be the next generation of people that is in, the Hall of Fame for the high school.
Yeah,
that,
you want your picture up in the trophy case.
All the state championships that have been won over the last 100 years. There's been different generations of people, and I knew that going into high school, I wanted to be that person for my graduating class.
Yeah.
So, so a lot of it was very similar to yourself. I was not the type that would go out a lot. Like there was in high school, in college, it happens. A lot of times after a varsity game, people go to people's houses. They drink libations that are alcoholic in nature. And I was just never one of those kids. So my mentality was always, well, while the varsity kids, as a freshman, I was thinking this, while the varsity kids are getting ready to go out and party over the weekend, right? I'm going to be going to bed early or going so I can get up early on Saturday and go run the track when they're taking the weekend off. So I started putting in time, and I said to myself, as somebody who was athletic but never really had a good diet, to me, I always said to myself, what is it that I can control that's going to get me to play on the varsity team for my sophomore year? And here's what I did. One of the things that really inspired me when I was going through high school was, he's now passed away, is Kobe Bryant. Okay. And there's this legendary thing for people that watch TikToks or go on YouTube. You could find it. He was doing an interview, either it might have been with Patrick Bet-David, who's a big podcaster about business. And he asked Kobe like where he gets his drive from and his motivation. And he started thinking about, well, when he came into the league, Tracy McGrady was just as good as him.
Oh.
Right?
Okay.
Right. And Tracy McGrady was like well known. They both came out of high school same year or roughly around the same year. They graduated and they entered the league. So Kobe started paying attention to what Tracy McGrady was doing. And Kobe was notoriously known for waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning and then training 4 to 6 in the morning. So wake up at 3, then he would train 4 to 6, Then he goes home, eats breakfast, relaxes a little bit, sees his kids off to school, goes back to the gym 9 to 11, right? Puts in another 2-hour session, goes home, eats some lunch, rests up, goes back 2 to 4, trains again, goes home, relaxes, eats dinner, sees his kids come home from school for a little bit, hit it again, 7 to 9, right? And then go home, rest, and go to sleep and wake up at 3 again. And he did this for most of his NBA career. And so his point is that if Tracy McGrady was just getting up and training, getting up at 7 at the gym for 9 to 11, and then was off, that 2 hours of work, Kobe was doing 4 times the amount of training, whether it was watching film or whether it was shooting jump shots or whether it was working on his dribbling skills compared to Tracy McGrady's one. That was one day. And so then he says, if I just do this every single day during the off season, right? That by the time by the time we get to year 5 or 6 in the league, there's no chance that he's ever going to catch up to me. And so that mindset I looked at as a competitive spirit when I was in high school to do that, which was I need to be doing things if I don't have the natural capabilities of, like if I don't have the best technique, I need to be training that technique, right? Constantly.
Yeah.
If I don't have the best footwork, I need to work on my footwork so that way I can get the angle that I need when I'm playing defensive end to have a better chance of hitting the quarterback, right? So I looked at my high school as investment years that was all about how do I maximize the amount of time that I have to train so I can guarantee that I'm going to play football. And so all those little things where people would go out, I would never go out. And instead, I would focus on how I can internalize that. And a person who comes to mind about the books, where this comes full circle, is I was recently listening to a podcast and I felt in my heart, I was brought to the same emotional place that I was when I was in high school. And that was listening to David Goggins' story.
Oh, yeah.
And so when I listened to that story, that was the thing in his mentality that brought me back. It was like I was back in high school again.
Yeah.
And so what I'm really interested in, I think the audience members would get out of hearing from you, Nick, is like, yeah, you changed the diet. Yeah, you changed your exercise habits. That's all great. Those are tips, I would say, that people can use. But what made you ultimately say, never again? I have to do something. And what? Because at some point, something's going to have to tell you to put the car in drive and do it.
Yeah.
Right? What was it for you?
So that's a good question. There's probably a few things. Definitely the knee injury was a big one where I never want to be able to get to that point to where I can't even move my own body, So there's like a little bit of fear of being able to see where that avenue can take me. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want my body telling me what I can do. I want to tell my body what to do,
Sure.
And then I think as another big one was my big mentor, one of my other big mentors, Dr. Randall Swanson over at the VA in UPenn. He's a big runner, and he also just like looks very healthy. And I think I could see what I want to become, and he represents a lot of that. And I think it's really important where if I'm telling patients, I'm on exercise as medicine. I'm the student representative here, right? And if we're advocating for these numbers that ACSM is upholding, right? Like whether it's BMI or body fat percentage or how much, blah, 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 and, VO2 max and all this kind of stuff. Well, I should represent like the better or best versions of those numbers. If I'm, you know what I mean? You should put your money where your mouth is, You should represent those ideals. You know what I mean? Who am I to advocate to someone if I'm not hitting those goals myself, right? And because, everyone's got excuses, and am kidding myself if I think my excuses are better than anyone else's, right? So that's another big thing, was being able to, okay, like realize, yeah, like if this is what I want to do. Also, how important was that powerlifting goal of mine?
Mm-hmm.
You know, this goal of being a physician and a doctor and promoting people's health is frankly more important than any exercise or performance related goal, right?
Mm-hmm.
So those things should cater to that, right? Rather than the other way around.
So what I'm getting at here is we're getting to the core of this now.
Yeah, it's an identity.
Yeah, so the identity, right? So we're peeling back things like an onion, right?
Yeah.
That's why I wanted to hear what you had to say for that. So what I'm hearing is that you had a knee issue, and that was sort of like a moment where you're like, man, how did I get here? And you sort of realize that as a student representative for Exercises Medicine, that you ought to be a champion and advocate by leading by example.
Yeah.
Right? So would you say that really what it comes down to from that perspective is it a self-respect issue for you, where you sort of said that in order for me to do this, I have to do this, so that way I have the self-respect and people will give me the respect that you deserve as a student representative. There's believability, someone who actually walks the walk instead of just talks the talk. You know what I mean?
100%.
Was it about self-respect at its core?
It's about, if I really want to advocate this message and I want people to swallow what we're, you know what I mean, what we're giving out, I damn well sure should adhere to these standards and be the very best version of whatever standards we have. You know what I mean?
Gotcha. Did you, so I know some of the things that we talked about in the prescription class that we've talked about was sort of figuring out goal weight. Did you use any of that to do it, or did you just sort of get started on your own?
Well, I think it's funny. So I remember we were doing the skin fold assessments and that DEXA scan, and they both had the same value. I honestly, I was like in a state of denial, where I think, so I'm reading this book by Robert Greene. It's called The Laws of Human Nature. And there's a lot of like personal insights to gain about, I think, where we as individuals think we're inherently special when it comes to specific things, and maybe some things don't adhere, like, you know what I mean? The rules don't apply to us, right? And I was kind of, I think, kidding myself when I thought I was giving myself excuses to why I was 30% body fat. You know what I mean? I was like, oh yeah, like I'm just really strong, or that's why I need to be this heavy, or something like that, right? Mm-hmm. And I was kidding myself that strength was just strength was healthy, right? And it's not, right? It's a component of athleticism, right? Mm-hmm. But it's not representative of your cardiovascular health, right? Which I think, honestly, is probably the most important thing we could probably have as a health-related component.
Gotcha.
So, or as a representation of exercise. So, I think that's what that, I forget if the knee injury. I forget. When did we take that? Was in the winter quarter?
Winter.
Okay. Yeah, so I had my knee injury prior to that. And I think I was just like, oh, I must have squatted wrong or something. So I think between the knee injury and your exercise testing and prescription class, they were like kind of bringing me out of this state of denial of the lifestyle that I was living, honestly, of like, oh, like why is my knee hurt, or why am I not able to walk up the 30th Street subway stairs and then not be winded? You know what I mean? Stuff like that. Or the main building at Drexel, going all the way up to like the third floor of that mansion, right? So like, I was, again, I was like kidding myself. And those slowly started to kind of open my eyes to what I really needed to see and to kind of understand and grasp.
Gotcha. Well, that's really helpful, because I think, again, when we think about why people do things, I'm always interested, not only from the physiological, but also what's going to get people to, because the information's out there. A lot of what we say is not necessarily anything particularly new.
Yeah.
But it's hearing and seeing someone who it's actually worked for, right? The first thing that someone's going to want to say is what was, like, the first thing someone's going to say is, how'd you do it, right? And you're going to tell them, you told them what worked for you, but that might not work for them because doing that worked for you when you were ready to do it. That's very important because Anthony Robbins talks about this. Tony Robbins talks about this, is that when people make decisions, whether it's to change their relationship or, somebody, if they're struggling with substance abuse, how to get off substances, is that people will say, well, it took you a lifetime to get to this point. It really is not. You make these types of decisions in a moment. You have a moment of clarity where you decide that you're making that decision. But there's all these little indicators that build up to that moment, right? That ultimately you get to the point that says, I have to do something, right? And that is a very usually, so I've mentioned this before, Frank Ferrangione is a mentor of mine. Was my undergraduate professor. He's retired. He's in his 80s now. Mm-hmm. And he's still active. He still golfs in his 80s. And he says that usually it comes down to one of three things. It's either something that's fun, like my sister runs 5Ks for fun, fear, right, where people are fearful of chronic health conditions that can happen with a poor diet and physical inactivity, not being active. Or the third thing would be vanity, right? People want to look a certain way for a wedding, right? So my significant other has a wedding this weekend. She wants to look good for the wedding, right? So now...
So where do you think the self-respecting, do you think that's a kind of vanity, but more of a metaphorical?
No, I think the self-respect is, so in order for, I think self-respect comes in where something means a great deal to you and it's threatened by the fact that you might not be able to do it. Or
so you think it's fear?
Or sometimes fear. I think it's fear. Self-respect comes down to fear, and I tell you why. I was fearful that I wasn't going to play varsity football, so I better do everything I can to make sure that I leave nothing on the table if I don't start football. Same type of thing when I lost weight in college. I was in graduate school. I had slowly gained a little bit of weight back from high school football into college, and eventually people make fun of it, but you know what? It worked for me. Was close. I looked at behavioral psychology. What is going to get me to go to the gym every day, right? And so I started creating rules. How can I fit this into my lifestyle? And so when you're in graduate school, a lot of time everything just goes right to your work. You wake up and you make coffee, you make a little breakfast. The first thing is usually, for a lot of people, getting to the lab, getting work done, making progress on that because it requires a huge effort. Mm-hmm. But then I realized that my advisor almost always finished up work and never answered any of my emails after 6 o'clock. So my new thing was I joined Planet Fitness at the time, and it was less than a mile from my house. And every night after dinner, I would go to Planet Fitness at 6:30. And I would do my workout regime, right? So whether I wanted to lift weights or I wanted to do some cardiovascular work afterwards, that was all fine. The challenge was I lost a lot of weight during that period of time, but I was aimlessly going to the gym. So, for example, what I had done in high school to be a football player was a very progressive overload type program, 8, 6, and 4, extremely high weight. I remember I would put like 365 on the barbell, and I would do 8 reps of that, and then I would go to 405 and do 6 reps of that.
Per squat?
Bench.
Oh, bench. Wow.
And then for my last rep, I'd go up to 465.
Damn.
For 4. And that's the time when all at Planet Fitness too, by the way. I'm surprised I didn't get thrown out for the lunk alarm.
Yeah.
I never lunked.
I was going to say that.
I never lunked really,
though.
Never lunked. And a friend of mine worked at the gym, and he kind of knew that I was just, but I never really identified by going to, Planet Fitness is a great place for a lot of people. Now, the whole culture about, judgment-free zone and stuff like that.
Yeah, everyone's got to start somewhere, I think.
You do.
And then honestly, a lot of people say, I have friends who are out of shape, or they're not happy with what they look like. I have more respect for everybody going to the gym. It doesn't matter what you look like than the people sitting on the couch.
Right.
They say that, hey, you're lapping everybody on the couch when you're in the gym, right? That's
right.
true. You know what I mean? Just putting, and then, yeah, maybe what you were doing at Planet Fitness for that brief period of time, you didn't have that intensity or that soul or whatever, but you're putting in some reps, right?
Right.
I'd say more often than not that I'm still, regardless of the fact that what I was doing might have been the best for my physical health during the quarantine in the last year or so, putting in some work and burning calories and doing something ultimately has kept me, like, I mean, my heart rate's still really low, you know what I mean? Blah, blah, blah. It's always been since, because I worked out. And, I think being able to at least, like, putting in some work, even if it doesn't have that intensity or that, that spirit, allowed me to, it only was like a minor tweak to change the type of exercises that I was doing, because I'm still putting in that work. Just it's now I can amp up the intensity a little bit or change the type, right?
Yeah. And I just think that, a lot of people, they won't start, and
That's the hardest thing.
And
just start putting those reps in.
And they look for reasons. I could say this because it's been myself at times, why people won't start, right? And so usually there's some doubt. There's doubt that they're going to be able to do it. They don't they can't track their heart rate, so they don't know if their heart rate is in the right range to be benefiting. But doing something is better than nothing. I think that's a really important start, is just turning it on, turning the recording on and starting, right?
Have you ever heard of the saying, paralysis by analysis?
Right. I mean, I have that. I have an analytical personality.
Yeah. And then you just get so caught up in I'm sure there's a billion YouTube reviews that are like, this workout's awful, or you need this shoe or whatever. It's just work out. You know what I mean? Just start and just putting in those reps in and get it comfortable. Everyone starts somewhere, and there is no perfect exercise. There is no perfect workout. There is no perfect shoe or t-shirt or whatever you need. You know what I mean? Sure.
I mean, I get into that. I get into the weeds about stuff because a lot of times you're right. Like, when it comes to buying things, I want to buy the best version of something I can so I never have to buy it again.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I just invested when I was at the ECSM conference in Hoka shoes. Right?
Hokas. Yeah, they're like running like on clouds.
Yeah,
apparently.
so I just bought a pair of those because I met one of the CEOs of the company there, was there selling some shoes and sized me up, and I bought a pair. You didn't buy them there, but I bought it online when I got home. And
they were at the Hoka.
Yeah, they had like shoe reps there, letting you try different shoes on and
cool.
find out different models. And they, people who are gait specialists would be able to tell you, this shoe would be good for you because of this. And so it was really helpful. But again, I can get by putting on any pair of shoes, right?
Exactly.
But the problem is people, there's this fear, and I see a lot of it in myself at times. There's this fear about what other people think of you. Where, when I think about why I spend time when I'm making pizza or sourdough bread, why I have to look at all the different types of metal scrapers to pick the dough up. Like, why do I care about the brand of the scraper? Because I don't want the scraper to break, and I don't want to have to replace it again very quickly.
Yeah.
That's a very micro-specific example that I think people get in their own head. At the end of the day, can you or can you not make the bread? Or can you or can you not make the steak? Or can you not make the salad? And you don't need the optimal circumstances in order to pursue something.
Yeah, because I think... Exactly, right? Because we have kind of the idea that something's going to fulfill our specific niche, and you know what I mean? And I think that's also kind of on the misunderstanding that we as people are very static in terms of our goals or what's going to work for us. I mean, not even just physically, just we progress, we might need to do specific other things, right? Mm-hmm. But also... like I just said, my exercise goals have changed vastly within 10 years. You know what I mean? Going from just wanting to look a specific way to just getting enough to pass an RBPT test to getting my run time up to looking a certain way to getting really, really physically fit. Now it's just to be healthy and to represent, the type of picture I want to, like all within 10 years, right? There's like, just start doing and start dipping your toes in the water. And then also by doing something that might not be the best for you, you're now gaining an understanding of yourself and what you want and what you don't want. So that way, like, there's that saying, buy once, cry once, right? Where when it comes to that metal scraper or something, you want the best one. But then you don't even know what metal scraper you need until you just buy some cheap dollar store one. And then you're like, oh, okay, now I know what I need to.
Yeah, you get clear on what you need after that.
Yeah. Get some insight.
It is important because, in terms of getting started, I feel like a lot of people don't want to get started unless they know it's going to work. They want confidence that if they do it, it's going to work, right? And not waste their time because like everybody's got something to say, and usually most of the people are naysayers. And I'll never forget this. And we could put it on this podcast if you want to read it. But I have when I was in school. Mm-hmm. One of the things that's constantly driven me throughout my entire life, my exercise goals, being a professor, mixed martial arts with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu now, everything, relationships, everything that I have accomplished in life has been because there's been somebody that was a naysayer that said I couldn't do something, right? I had people in my own family that said, you're not smart enough to get a doctorate. Or why don't you give up on your goals? Don't you just want to work for a while and get a real job? These are the types of things that often would happen to me in my 20s that I didn't do it to spite them. I did it because I knew people that I looked up to who had very successful careers that were able to do it. I said something that Russell Wilson, the quarterback now for the Denver Broncos, formerly of the Seattle Seahawks, said, which is, why not me? And that really drove me and inspired me to just say, you know what? I don't really have people that are in my corner that are telling me that I can do this, but I'm going to do it because, and what drives me day to day is proving people wrong. When somebody says I can't do something that I think is important or inspirational, that's going to positively impact people's lives, that's what drives me to work late and get up early and put in a good effort. And so naysayers can sometimes be the fuel that will help you reach your health and fitness goals.
I think it's not just to prove people wrong, but it's also knowing that they are wrong and that you believe in yourself and that you can show them, hey, listen, this is, you know what I mean? Blah, 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 blah. I think there is a little bit of extra kind of icing on the cake to kind of shove it in their face afterwards, you know what I mean? And once you achieve that goal. But we're all able to get these goals done. I'd say 99% of us have, all the necessary tools required for us to complete this type of goal that we have is just getting healthier, right? And
sure.
You know what I mean? And, through a roundabout way or a straight one, you would be able to achieve it.
A goal without a roadmap is a dream.
Yeah.
Right? Because in order to reach a goal, you have to have objectives that lead you on a particular road to ultimately accomplish the goal, right? Yeah. Like getting a PhD is an example, right? Usually most people have to have a master's. Well, it's better if you have a master's. The success rate is very high if you have a master's. Not that you can't. I've known people that have gotten PhDs right from undergrad. But in certain circumstances, it's a little bit harder because you have to have the research background. You have to have a very specific set of skills.
Yeah.
Going into a PhD, the expectation of being a PhD student is different than a master's student. So a lot of times when people say, I want to get my PhD, what do you think? Usually I recommend first trying the master's and then rolling those credits into a PhD program if you really want to pursue the PhD after that. And it's because you get sort of some low-level skills that don't really have the same level of expectation as a PhD student. You've grown, you're older, 2 more years, you're mature. But really, in order to become a PhD, right, you have to get some research experience. You have to go through your coursework. You have to, let's say you're coming in with a master's. You got to go through all your coursework. You have to maintain a GPA, a certain coursework. Then you got to take comprehensive exams, a written, sit in an office for 8 hours and write a comprehensive exam. Then after you do the written comprehensive exam, you have to go do an oral comprehensive exam. Then you have to write up your whole proposal and hope your advisor approves it. So there's different objectives along the way towards that goal. But the order, what a good mentor does is the mentor puts the objectives in the appropriate order that most efficiently gets you from point A to point B towards that long-term goal.
Okay.
But there should sort of be some level of expected suffering. And sometimes I get flack for saying that. But
Yeah, I mean,
you need to suffer a little bit in life because that's how you grow and develop.
exactly. Yeah. I agree with that 100% too. I mean, there's always a time and place to kind of not be in a place of discomfort, right?
Sure.
We all need that area or that moment of respite. Yeah, but what they say is like a diamond is made from like superheated and compressed carbon, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where what was once graphite or whatever is now a diamond, and that's you have to be able to overcome those goals. That's how you get better, right? That's how you improve yourself, right? You have to face some kind of challenge or whatever. I mean, these specific goals for people are not necessarily easy.
Right.
They can be hard, and I think that's you're fooling yourself if there's always like a quick way or you know what I mean or whatever way of doing it. Where I mean, these are hard. Like the hardest things are, or the best things in life are also often the hardest to get.
Sure.
But you can get them, and just being able to constantly believe in yourself. I mean, when you go through the PhD program, you had to believe that you could get that PhD.
Mm-hmm.
When you played for the varsity team, are you on the trophy? Are you like on the trophy case?
Yeah.
You are?
Yeah.
Nice.
I
Yeah.
mean, now, but again, like
But
they
you
have
believed yourself,
they have my
though.
picture still up in I think the weight room in
Yeah.
terms of like records and stuff like that.
But you believed you could get there, and I think that's one of the first things you need to know is like I can get it. I just need to work for it, right?
Sure. Yeah. And that's the key is you got to be willing to put in the work. And the problem is if you don't have the best thing about suffering is you have perspective.
Yeah.
So when things get hard, like Gary Vaynerchuk says this sometimes, and he's a motivational speaker type thing.
Yeah.
The business person, he's got a lot of business adventures. But one of the things that he talks about is like if you're struggling, it's not that you're not good, you're just early in the process, right? And so
Yeah.
so suffering to a certain degree is imperative towards growth and development, because if everything in your life is very easy and it just comes to you very naturally, you don't have to work very hard, what's going to happen when you do face it? You're not going to be prepared to deal with that type of situation.
Exactly.
So going through things that is challenging is like, the yo-yo of the dieting, the yo-yo of the weight that both of us have sort of gone through. Is there's circumstances that happen, probably very stressful times where you have a lot of responsibilities, there's only a finite amount of time, and you have to figure out how to do it. And so for whatever reason, sometimes eating an unhealthy option when you've skipped a meal or you haven't eaten healthy is getting something that's unhealthy. Sometimes it's very satisfying. And so once you get through that period of time, you have this realization that sort of says, I deserve this, whatever this goal is. Mm-hmm. I deserve this. This is the life that I want to live. This is who I aspire to be. And so if there's a delta between who you are today and who you want to be in the future, whether that's spiritually, whether that's emotionally, whether that's intellectually, whether that's physically, that's good to have self-awareness to realize that who you are today is not who you aspire to be. Mm-hmm. But then the question then is okay, if there's a delta between who you are today and who you want to be in the future with any of those domains, the good news is you have time to become that person.
Yeah.
Now, how do you become that person? The best way that a lot of experts will probably tell you is that find people who have accomplished where you want to be in the future in business, in life, physically, emotionally, and find out what they are doing differently that might be contributing to why they're at that level. Okay. Are they efficient with their schedule? What are the most important tactics that the person does to be successful in business, to be successful in going to the gym, to be successful in actually not only going to the gym, but getting the results at the level of the gym. So mentorship is really important because mentors often are at a level where somebody else wants to be, and they can give you the guidance to eliminate a lot of the inefficiencies between where you are today, help you with the order of the process to get to where they are for the future. So that is like a big, big thing that I've noticed in life, is that a lot of people who want a particular goal, they know they want it. They might even know a little bit about how to do it, but it's not perfect. It's not a clear system. But having the self-actualization to realize that you know what you want, you know what you deserve, and then figuring out where your opportunities for improvement are is a great first step, because there's plenty of people in the world who've been successful in each of those domains. And you could read books on it. You can listen to podcasts like this. You can, I have a friend that doesn't listen to podcasts anymore. And the reason why he doesn't listen to podcasts is because he says that sometimes people are just talking and
except ours though, right?
Except ours.
Yeah.
But the reason he prefers audiobooks, because he says the audiobooks went through the editing process. So so it's been, down to the critical message of what people know. Yeah. And there's some truth to that. But I would just say that is like the biggest moment of clarity, whether, for your own goal or a goal that someone else you're trying to help with, is seeing where you are now and what are you happy and content with? What are you not happy and content with? And this is sort of like an idea, is really take some time, write it down, and you think about it. Okay, how am I doing right now in the world physically? How am I doing financially? How am I doing spiritually? How am I doing relationally, right? And how can you improve if you feel that you need to improve? And that is big picture what I think is how somebody can build their own rich life. Yeah. Because you could find someone who's got $1 billion in the bank and they're miserable. You could find somebody who's poor that has enough and they're happy. I would consider the person, Sir John Templeton said this one time, that the person who has no money but has enough and is satisfied is truly a rich person. Versus somebody who never has enough. If greed becomes the root of what you want in life, you'll never have enough. So Zig Ziglar, another salesman, motivational speaker, who I've listened to mostly in college, he used to say that you can get everything in life that you want if you'll just help enough other people get what they want. So if you, by being helpful, by being charitable, by helping other people, by tithing and giving them opportunities to improve, you'll get everything and more that you need in your life.
Personally, I found that when I came here to Drexel and started to just see this overwhelming kind of like charitable community, I really wanted to participate in that. And I felt that my life attitude has changed drastically. And I feel like I am now like this magnet for other generosity towards me as well. 100%, like living to serve and everything. I think that creates such a healthy life and great perspective on things.
I agree. I think, it's very hard for people to admit that, because we live in a culture where people are always sort of compared to, or
it's a very individualistic society,
right.
And you know what I mean. It's very and I think being able to, once you're at a place to where you're comfortable and being able to help others, I think completely changes your life perspective. And also, I don't know, I'm sure there's like the attitude that you evoke or the whatever, but I mean, it's karma, you know what I mean? Like, you start helping people and you will be helped, more and more and more.
It's very true. And I think, if people are struggling
Yeah.
with things in life, sometimes giving is the best thing that you can do, donating your time, right? So if
Yeah.
things are not going well, right, your activity program is not going well, sometimes, going and doing something for the betterment of others, right? It just helps to put everything into perspective for you and you get clarity. And so if you're struggling with a domain or something in your life, sometimes giving sort of primes the pump for positive vibes to come in the future, and that will come back and help you.
Yeah. I felt like 99% of the opportunities I got here at Drexel were because I first offered my own services. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And then people will love to just requite, So, but I think we're probably running close.
We are getting close. Nick, do you have anything else that you'd like to share with the audience with regards to your journey and, any parting advice before we finish up for today?
I guess, personally, I guess one thing that they specify in the book by Robert Greene, The Laws of Human Nature, that I've been reading, is we are inherently not special as people. Mm-hmm. But what makes us special are those sacrifices that we do and persevering through tough times and everything and putting in the work. And that's what makes us special. You have to earn that specialness. And I think that's pretty inspirational to be able to, really swallow that. So to realize that, you know what I mean? We do operate on the same rules as everybody else. But we still are able to overcome those challenges and those barriers with those rules in place. So, but yeah.
Well, Nick, this has been terrific. Thanks so much for sharing your story, both with the last podcast 12 weeks ago. I can't believe it's been 12 weeks. Where
12
you were
weeks?
45 pounds heavier, or maybe when you first started your journey, you dropped 45 pounds.
Yeah.
30 pounds.
Yeah.
30 pounds since we last had the last podcast. And I think this would be really important for people to hear and inspirational because you're leading the way. And
Thank you.
That, no pun intended, but that's ACSM's slogan. So leading the way. So with that being said, we'll go ahead and end the podcast for today. Nick, thank you so much for sharing your story. Hope this has been beneficial and inspirational for some of you listening. And we'll see you all in the next one.
See you guys.
Take care.